Hello chums, and welcome to Taming a Monster, the series where I take some of Gran Turismo 7's most ridiculous cars to see if I can tweak them so that a talentless pleb like me can handle them without being killed to death. Like any common ruffian, I'm using a bog standard PlayStation 5 controller, and I have all driver assists turned off, except for ABS. Let's see what car is trying to murder me today. A few months back, I tried to tame the Suzuki Cappuccino with a near 600 horsepower rotary engine swap. Admittedly, I had rather limited success with that one, so how about its closest competition? This is the Honda Beat, but the screaming 3-cylinder engine has been swapped out for a soulless 2-litre turbo making over 500 horsepower, and better still, it sounds like a vacuum cleaner. As usual, the Beat It has all of the upgrades including the wide body, but none of the settings have yet been tweaked, other than the downforce, which is maxed, and the transmission, which has already been adjusted to suit this car. The Beat the Meat has aftermarket wheels in the standard size. Increasing the size can improve the car's agility, potentially at the expense of stability, so I opted not to do so on this sub 800kg mid-engined shoebox. It has a front splitter for front downforce, and a custom wingset for the maximum rear downforce, something I highly recommend for this particular engine swap. If you're interested in learning more about aero, downforce, or any other aspect of tuning your car, I have a series called Tuning for Beginners which covers everything from suspension to differential to the transmission. The chosen test track was Kyoto Driving Park, a circuit that I find almost as boring as this engine. The Honda Beetroot got a fairly clean launch thanks to a mixture of the rear weight bias, improving traction, and my gearing. From there, things went downhill. Grippy tyres and lightweight mid-engine cars don't typically go very well together, and as a result, the car was an uphill battle to drive in more or less every situation. Jesus Christ, where the fuck did that Jeep just come from? The main issue, unsurprisingly, was oversteer, almost constantly. The front end is simply too lively and too cheap for the rear end to keep up with. The high-speed S-bends on this particular track are slightly hellish as a result. Also, the brakes are shit. Ow. As usual, I increased the natural frequency and the anti-roll buzz. This is because the car was wobbling all over the place, so even if it's trying to kill me, having less body roll will at least make it more predictable when it does behead me. Believe it or not, the Honda Beelzebub did actually improve. Not by bloody much, it was still trying to kill me at every turn, but reducing the body roll actually did make the car feel slightly more secure. The brakes are still disastrously bad, and the power and lift-off oversteer was very difficult to work with, so that'll be what I try to fix next. For my next changes, I increased compression. This usually helps the car handle the curbs more effectively. I then reduced camber, which can help with braking distances. Reducing it more at the rear can also help with lift-off oversteer. I also added some rear toe in to reduce power oversteer, and some front toe out to reduce lift-off oversteer. The Honda Bates Motel was now slightly more stable.
You bastard.
Its lightweight still made it extremely skittish and prone to oversteer. It's definitely not what I would consider an enjoyable car to drive, but it's not trying to hurt me as much as it was before. The brakes are still utterly hopeless, mind, something I'm not sure I can fix.
Christ.
For my final tweaks, I adjusted the differential. I increased initial torque to slow down the car's reaction times. I decreased acceleration sensitivity to hopefully reduce power oversteer. I reduced braking sensitivity, which should hopefully improve those milk bottle caps that we're referring to as brakes. I also decreased front downforce to improve high-speed stability. The overall handling characteristics were not a hell of a lot better, however more importantly the brakes were noticeably improved. We'll take the victories where we can get them. Since the car now felt something resembling reasonable, I figured now would be a good time to see how it would perform at the Nurburgring. I had a slightly senile moment that ended up lasting about a day, since I made some tweaks to the setup, completed a lap of the Green Hell, got what I thought was a decent time, and then a day later realised I had forgotten to apply the increased body rigidity upgrade. Now, the main thing this does is improve stability at high speeds, which meant that I could increase the front downforce compared to what I ran on my first attempt. I also adjusted the tail angle to try and reduce power oversteer, and I added some ballast weight to the front to help with overall stability. The Honda Bitch is an interesting car, even if its current engine isn't. Being a K car, it's obviously diminutive and as a result ultra lightweight, which should make it quite a nightmare to drive, but honestly it's not half bad now. Of course, it doesn't stick to the road like a Group 4 car, but you would be forgiven for expecting it to be much less stable than it actually turned out to be. Even before I remembered to fit the body rigidity upgrade, it handled pretty respectably, hence I forgot about it. It's odd, because I always saw this engine swap as total overkill, and while I still think the K20 has as much personality as an accountant, the car actually handles 550 horsepower semi-decently. I do think I would still rather have a higher revving engine that's somewhere around the 300 horsepower mark though, such as the M16 from the Suzuki Swift Sport or the CA18DE from the S13 Silvia, since they both sound awesome, and this car would still be pretty formidable with 300 horsepower, not to mention much nicer to drive. With the K20, this car is fun in the same way as the running of the bulls in Spain is fun. It's uncomfortable and you'll probably end up in an intensive care unit. As for where it'll come on the leaderboard, its closest competition is the Suzuki Cappuccino with the rotary engine, though that car got a time of 6 minutes 42, which is now rather low down on the leaderboard. Assuming this will be slightly faster, it's hopefully not too much of a stretch to assume this could take the fight to the Porsche swapped Beetle, or maybe even the K24 swapped Suzuki Jimny. In the end, the Honda ball ache managed a 6 minutes 31, blowing the Cappuccino out of the water, along with the 1400 horsepower Ford Raptor, the 1000 horsepower Willys Jeep, and it's a blink of an eye away from the 1200 horsepower Volvo 240, which shows just how shite the Volvo is. So, that was my attempt to tame a monster. I hope my sittings helped, or that you enjoyed this video. Join me next time where I'm revisiting an old monster that deserves a second chance. Thank you very much for watching, and if you're feeling particularly generous, I would greatly appreciate your subscription. Take care, and ta-ra.